So one thing that's the brush is really, really important and useful for doing is applying some type of effect in a particular location or way. So this one, let's say we wanted to have a little bit of brightening happening in the eyes or highlighting in the hair. One way we could do that is to add an adjustment layer. Let's say it's a brightness adjustment layer, and if I just popped it up, say like that, over the entire image, that's fine, but maybe we don't want that over the entire image. So what we could do is set this up and utilize this layer mask right here. Right now it's set to show all. If I fill the layer mask with black, that means it's hiding this entire adjustment layer. So we have our original image. Now we can use the brush tool to reveal, set it to white, on this layer mask certain aspects of the image. And this is how we can brush this particular adjustment setting onto certain parts of the image. So let's just set the opacity, flow. So I want to put in a little bit of brightness to the eyes, just a touch like that, just a little drop of the brush. Let's lower this and even lower. Now I can just add a little bit of brightness to the hair. And looks like I need to take some of it out too. Okay, so it's hard to see the kind of work that's done, but if you toggle this, you'll be able to see quite a bit has been done. So the brushes are really useful in applying selective and subtle applications of changes to your image. In this case, we're using the brush to reveal parts of an adjustment through a mask, and we're using the brush to follow the subject matter. In particular, we're looking for things that might relate to the way somebody might see this image. You know, people look at the eyes first, and then people follow contrast lines. So by brushing in adjustments specifically to these areas, we are applying subtle changes to the image that will add to the impact of its viewing. So there's one example. Let's take a look at this one. One thing that we could do with the brush is, let's say, for instance, we have this idea of a filter. Maybe I want to create some interest here and create some blur around this area. I can turn this whole image into a smart object. By doing that, this little icon shows up, meaning it's a smart object. That means the original image itself is not going to be changed. So if I run things like filters on this layer, the filters will be set in a non-destructive manner. And this is really important to know about, because if I run a filter as is on a regular layer, it's going to change that information. I'll never be able to go back unless I have access to the history of this document. With a smart filter, it's applying this filter on top of this image. So I can change the image, I can change the filter setting, I can do anything I want. So I'm going to show you how to use the brush to work with a smart filter. First, let's put in a Gaussian blur. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So we've created a blur. Now on this filter, I can set a mask. Well, let's do this. Now that I've set this, I'm going to duplicate this layer. And on this duplicate, I'm going to get rid of these filters. So I've run a Gaussian blur over my whole image. And now I'm going to use my layer mask and brush tool to do the same thing as I did in this portrait. Although this portrait, I'm working on a mask in an adjustment layer. Here, I'm working a mask on a control layer. So this is my original hidden, and if I use this brush tool, I can paint in fidelity into this image. So let's raise the settings here. Oops. There we go. Okay. All right. Actually, that's all I need to do, because you can see here that just by creating more focus in the eyes, I have now changed the way somebody might look at this image. The other thing that I can do now with this Gaussian blur is I can edit it. I can change this amount to make it more or less, and you can see you can actually see the mask work. So also I can take this and use my smart filter like a blending mode. Okay. One thing that we can do with the brush is use it as a painting tool, retouching tool. Take this, I'll sample color here. Now, why would I want to do this instead of the clone stamp? Well, the clone stamp is destructive. The clone stamp is working with all of the details that are in the sample area. Maybe I don't want any of that. This is just a really quick and effective way maybe to clean up this hairline. And you can see as as I get deeper and deeper into this little edit, I want to actually go up here in the options settings for the tool, the brush tool, and adjust things, in particular hardness. Hardness has to do with the outer edge of this brush. How much of the brush stroke is happening on the edge. So this is going to be, you're going to see it make much more cleaner changes on the edge. Let's zoom in. You can see I can really work in haircut. And since we're working on a completely new layer, we're not changing anything about the background, that board. Okay. Before and after. Oops. Let's keep looking. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Let's do some direct painting. I'll put a layer up. And then we'll get a color going. Okay, simple brush stroke, then add a blend mode. Bring it back. Maybe even reduce the fill. Okay. This would be a really quick and easy way to add some tone to the image. We had a landscape image, no? Yeah, this one. Okay. All right. So let's try some dodging and burning. I'll turn this into a smart object. We'll put an exposure. Let's call this highlights. So for our highlights, let's say we want to work this area here. I'd like to bring it down a bit. Again, I'm going to use a negative mask. Hide all that. And then we're going to use a brush to introduce this highlight control. Whoa, let's very strong. The general approach would be to do your brushwork first and then apply blend mode. Okay. Let's do one for the shadows. Actually, let's tone this. Let's give it a warm end of day feel. Just following the contours of the landscape. If we take a look at what's going on here, this is the pattern of my brush stroke on the mask. You just hold Option key and then click into your mask, and you'll see that that basically there's a spreading involved. This type of tonal brushing, adjustment brushing, tends to follow visual geometries and not necessarily visual content. So think about the movement that's inherent in your image, and align your brush strokes with that. It's very different from, say, this type of approach where, you know, we've got the eyes, we want to bring out the eyes a little bit, and then, you know, portrait, you tend to light light the edge of the silhouette to increase some contrast in the view. Here we want to be just a little bit more obvious, maybe. There. could even also tone it down. And even add some of this tone into my light source here. Let that mix a little bit. Okay, so that's a specific brushed warming rather than an entire cast. These are all little touches that you can use. Color grading is about changing the mood of your image without necessarily changing the content. So in this image here, we clean up the hair a little bit. If we were to give this a warm look, let's put a gradient in. Let's set these colors. Actually, let's not do the gradient. Well, maybe. I'm just trying to think, is this going to be applicable with the brush? Will it make sense with the brush? Probably not. So if we're going to give this a warm look, we can use the photo filter. We'll use the actual warming filter. There's several of them. Let's see. Let's use this A1. We can set density. And then again, the brushwork is about editing this tone. So we will edit the tone by reducing the amount of it in certain areas. Here's what it might look like if we reduced the tone around the subject. Okay, that would be one approach. Or let's duplicate this layer. Here's what it might look like if we reduced it around the subject and left it around the surroundings. I kind of like this better. Okay, so here's the warming. Let's just create this, call it warming. All right, let's try one that's cooling. Here's an 80. Okay. It's cooling. Let's try it. Let's get two of these. Gonna label these. Okay, so if we want cooling only on the outside, that means we will remove the, we will unbrush, brush hide this photo filter from our subject. Okay, and then if we wanted to cool only the subject, then we would brush hide a little bit from the surroundings. You get to decide, what would be the application of this and whether does it work? Does it work for you? Here's the here's the original. Here's the cooling on the subject only. Here's the cooling on mainly the outside. Then here's the warming. Just as an example, real popular in office type of, there's so many colors here. Let's use a green. Increase the density. This would be, kind of fluorescent. In the basement car park office. Generally, when you're doing some color grading and you throw a color down, even if it accomplishes your general idea, you should be using the brush, doing a little bit of toning to create, so that your color edit can follow the objectives of the image. There's a visual hierarchy that your edits are always trying to work to support. That visual hierarchy means there's either some text or subject or some kind of color or mood that you really want to come forward. Keep that in mind. That's what the brush is there for. It's to give you a way to take control or to create specificity in your these overall edits, these overall actions. So here I'm going to pull out some of this, just a little bit of the face, maybe the hair. Okay, so I still get that green vibe, but it doesn't get in the way of me seeing and connecting with the subject. So that's really the brush work. So this is a brush for color grading.